you. Thank you. I am fired up now. Thank you, California. What an unbelievable reception. What an unbelievable convention. And before every event we do, I usually have a minute to sit quietly and collect my thoughts. And recently I've found myself reflecting on what it was that led me to public service in the first place. I live in Chicago now, but got a little Chicago contingent. But I'm not a native of that great city. I moved there when I was just out of college, and a group of churches offered me a job as a community organizer so I could help rebuild neighborhoods that had been devastated by the closing of steel plants. The salary was $12,000 a year, plus enough money to buy an old beat-up car. And so I drove out to Chicago from New York, where I'd gone to school, and I didn't know a living soul in Chicago. And during the time I was there, working with these church groups, I set up job training programs for the unemployed and after-school programs for kids. And it was the best education that I ever had, because I learned in those neighborhoods that when ordinary people come together, they can achieve extraordinary things. And after 3 years of doing that work, I went back to law school. I left there with a degree and a lifetime of debt. But I turned down the corporate job offers so I could come back to Chicago and organize a voter registration drive. And I started a civil rights practice. And I began to teach constitutional law. And after a few years, people started coming up to me and telling me that I should run for a state Senate seat that had opened up. So I did what every wise man does when confronted with such an important decision. I prayed on it, and I asked my wife. And after consulting these two higher powers, I decided to get in the race. And everywhere I went, block clubs, PTA meetings, and barbershops and beauty shops, I get the same two questions. First, where'd you get that funny name Barack Obama? Although people wouldn't say it right. And they'd call me Alabama, or they'd call me Yo Mama, and I'd have to explain, no, the name's Obama. And my father was from Kenya, which is where I got my name from. And then my mother was from Kansas, which is where I got my accent from. But the second thing people would ask me was, you seem like a nice young man. You've done great work. You've got a fancy resume, teaching in a fine law school, civil rights lawyer, family man, church-going man. Why would you want to go into something dirty and nasty like politics? Why would you want to go into politics? And I understood the question and the cynicism. We all understand it. We understand it because we get a sense today that politics has become a business and not a mission. In the last several years, we've seen Washington become a place where keeping score of who's up and who's down is more important than who's working on behalf of the American people. We've been told that our mounting debts don't matter, that the economy is doing great, and so Americans should be left to face their anxieties about rising health care costs and disappearing pensions on their own. We've been told that climate change is a hoax, that our broken schools can't be fixed, that we're destined to send millions of dollars a day to Middle East dictators for their oil. We've seen how a foreign policy based on bluster and bombast can lead us into a war that should have never been authorized and should have never been waged. And when we try to have an honest debate about the crisis, Sunday talk shows, the conversation isn't about finding common ground, it's about finding someone to blame. We're divided into red states and blue states, and we're told always to point the finger at somebody else, the other party, or gay people, or immigrants. For good reason, the rest of us have become cynical about what politics can achieve in this country. As we've turned away in frustration, we know what's filled the void. The lobbyists and influence peddlers with the cash and the connections. The ones who've turned government into a game only they can afford to play. They write the checks and you get stuck with the bill. They get the access while you get to write a letter. They think they own this government, but we're here today, California, to tell them that our government is not for sale. For sale. We want it back. People tell me I haven't spent a lot of time learning the ways of Washington. But I promise you this, I've been there long enough to know that the ways of Washington must change. I am running for president because the time for can't do, won't even try style of politics is over. It is time to turn the page, California. It is time to turn the page. There is an awakening. There's an awakening taking place in America today. From New Hampshire to California, from Texas to Iowa, we are seeing crowds we've never seen before. We're seeing people showing up for the very first political event of their lives. Here today, and they're coming because they know that we're at a crossroads right now, because we're facing a set of challenges we haven't seen in a generation. And if we don't meet those challenges, we could end up leaving children a world that's a little poorer and a little meaner than the one that we found. And so the American people are hungry for a different kind of politics, the kind of politics based on the ideals upon which this country was founded. The idea that we're all connected as one people, that we all have a stake in one another, that we have mutual responsibilities towards each other. It's what I learned as a state senator in Illinois, that you can turn the page on old debates, that it's possible to compromise, so long as you never compromise your principles. And that so long as you're willing to listen to each other, we can assume the best in people instead of the worst. That's how we were able to reform a death penalty system that sent 13 innocent people to death row. That's how we were able to give health insurance to 20,000 more children who needed it. That's how we gave $100 million worth of tax cuts, not to the rich, but to working families in Illinois through an earned income tax credit. That's how we passed the first ethics reform in 25 years. We've seen too many campaigns where our problems are talked to death, where 10-point plans are crushed under the weight of the same old politics once the election's over, where experience in Washington doesn't always translate into results for the American people. And so if we do not change our politics, if we do not fundamentally change the way Washington works, then the problems we've been talking about for the last generations will be the same ones that haunt us for generations to come. We must find a way to come together in this country, to realize that the responsibility we have to one another as Americans is greater than the pursuit of any ideological agenda or corporate bottom line. Democrats of California, it is time to turn the page on our politics.